Hello, all, and welcome back to the channel. To the old and new subscribers, I appreciate you. Please come on in and hit the like, share, and subscribe button. Please and thank you. Well, what exactly made Watergate one of the biggest political scandals in American history? What do you think did it? What did it, and simply put, was it was a cover-up designed to protect a presidency. Most people would say it was a burglary. In 1972, 5 men broke into the Democratic National Committee headquarters inside the Watergate building in Washington, D.C., and they got caught. The end of story, right? Not even close. In fact, that's probably the biggest misconception about Watergate. If the story had ended with the break-in, Richard Nixon, our 37th president, and a Republican, probably would have finished his second term. Presidents survive scandals. Politicians survive embarrassing headlines. What they often don't survive is the moment the American people decide they no longer are being told the truth. And I think that's why so many people are suddenly using the phrase Watergate 2 when they talk about the Epstein files. They're not saying the stories are identical. They're saying the patterns feel familiar. But before we can decide whether the comparison makes any sense, we need to remember what exactly happened on Watergate. Let me play this clip.
Nixon took to his grave. Richard Nixon smiled for the cameras. He called himself a patriot. But behind closed doors, he was running one of the most corrupt operations in American history. It started with a break-in, June 17th, 1972. 5 men were caught inside the Democratic National Committee headquarters. Nixon said he knew nothing. He lied. His own secret tapes proved it. Nixon had been secretly recording every conversation in the White House. And when investigators demanded those tapes, he fought back hard. He fired the special prosecutor investigating him. He paid hush money to keep people quiet. He used the FBI, the CIA, and the IRS to destroy his enemies. This wasn't politics. This was a criminal operation run from the Oval Office. On August 9th, 1974, Nixon became the only U.S. president to ever resign. And just weeks later, Gerald Ford gave him a full pardon. No trial, no prison, no accountability. Millions of Americans were furious. The cover-up worked. And some of what Nixon did in those final days? Still classified. The full truth may never come out. Comment the word Nixon if this blew your mind. Follow for more American.
Wow. See, that's the part of Watergate people forget about. It wasn't just a burglary. It wasn't even just the tapes. It was the realization that the people closest to the president had stopped trying to explain what happened to the American people, and they had started to try to control what the public knew about what happened. The cover-up became bigger than the original event. And that's why I think so many Americans are looking at the Epstein files and feeling a sense of deja vu, us older people. For years, we were told that these files mattered. They were told, other people were told, I guess Republican, MAGA, whatever, were told there were unanswered questions. They were told that powerful people had been protected and that transparency was the only way to restore public confidence. The message was simple. Release the files, release the Epstein files, let the American people see the evidence and make up their own mind. Then Donald Trump returned to office. And the people who had spent years demanding transparency suddenly became the people responsible for providing it. That is where this story starts to take a turn. Let me play this clip.
If you were watching the Trump administration in 2025,
you would have gotten the impression that the Epstein files were a relatively minor issue.
President Trump suggested that nobody cared.
He said that the Epstein story was boring,
that this was a hoax.
These files were made up by Comey. They were made up by Obama.
But what we learned while we were reporting our book, Regime Change, was just how much the Trump administration, up to the highest levels of the government, were paralyzed over how to deal with a growing crisis. Their biggest obstacle was Donald Trump.
Trump wanted it buried. He didn't want to release the files. His staff knew that this was an issue that they couldn't really talk about.
People in his orbit found him snapping at them if they even raised the issue of Jeffrey Epstein.
So over the summer of 2025, you had some of Trump's most senior advisors, the top level of the government, gathered in the Situation Room,
which is typically used for national security or responding to national disasters,
to figure out a way to spin their way out of this.
Not with the president, but among themselves.
It was an issue that came back to bite them, because many of the same senior people who were in the Situation Room were very strong advocates for releasing the Epstein files way back even before the 2024 campaign, and potentially a client list, a list of powerful men who were, the rumors had it, involved in sex trafficking with Epstein. We have seen no evidence that there is a client list.
But the idea of a client list had been popularized by, among others, Trump's future vice president.
Seriously, we need to release the Epstein list. That is an important thing.
His future FBI director.
Put on your big boy pants and let us know who the pedophiles are.
And his future deputy FBI director.
The Epstein client list, I believe, is going to rock the political world. There's a reason they're hiding it.
After he was elected, his own attorney general appeared to confirm that a client list existed.
It's sitting on my desk right now to review. That's been a directive by President Trump.
They go through the files and the message changes very substantially. Very quickly, it became clear that Trump himself was mentioned numerous times across these files.
Does not mean that anything said there was verified about Trump or anyone else, but it did mean that releasing the files was a non-starter for the president and his team.
In the coming months, there were internal conversations about, well, what do we do?
In early July, the Justice Department and the FBI released a joint memo with no names attached to it, just letterhead, saying, in fact, there was no client list and that there were no other people who should be prosecuted in connection with Jeffrey Epstein's crimes.
And all of a sudden, many of his voters who thought that they were electing a president and people around him to get to the bottom of the Epstein story were suddenly feeling that they were actually part of a cover-up.
How many of you are satisfied with the results of the Epstein investigation?
See, I think it's important for you to understand where this story came from. These two people, Swan and Haberman, I can't say that name, Haberman. They're the two that investigated the Trump administration and the White House, Swan. They're the two that have come out with these explosive emails, these explosive inserts from the White House. These two reporters right here. So they're telling the story of how they figured out that there was a cover-up going on in the White House. Let's finish the story.
During this whole period, Trump was just getting more and more fed up.
He was very used to telling his base what to think and having them believe him.
He accused his supporters of being weaklings. He said he didn't want their support anymore.
He used expletives to say this was all fake, and again said this was all the fault of Democrats.
Any attempts that Trump made to downplay the scandal only reinforced suspicions among his base that they were hiding something. So at those meetings last summer, when President Trump's most senior aides gathered away from him, the vice president thought that they should put everything out there, that Congress was going to force the issue anyway. Others, like the chief of staff, said absolutely no way the president would be okay with that. There was a conversation about whether Todd Blanche, who was the Deputy Attorney General at the time, whether he should go on Joe Rogan. The Vice President said that he should be the one to go on Rogan.
What they didn't talk about was prosecuting additional men or any kind of widespread justice for the victims. We're talking about a number of women who say that they were victimized and abused by Jeffrey Epstein. Many of them were minors. The discussion in the Situation Room was not about how to give these women a hearing or a chance to tell their stories. These meetings were about how to handle the political fallout around the White House.
What ended up happening is their hand was forced by Congress. They ultimately passed, nearly unanimously, the Epstein Files Transparency Act. Trump was forced to sign it, and what was clear from our reporting is even after that, even after the passage of this bill and the release of so many of these files, the issue didn't go away at all. Maggie and I obtained a document written by President Trump's top pollster, Tony Fabrizio, which described focus groups that were conducted in March of this year.
It was the 6th most important issue raised by voters in this focus group.
Head of crime and safety, the military, data centers. I mean, these are really potent political issues that ranked below the Epstein files. More than a year after they first started to try to deal with the Epstein crisis.
He just simply could not make it go away by telling his supporters they should believe him instead of something else.
Wow. Okay. So this wasn't a rumor that started on social media. It wasn't a random internet story. It came from reporting, them covering up the Epstein files, them trying to cover up the Epstein file. This came from reporting. Legitimate reporters knew of women, knew of the story, knew of the cover-up, who know of the cover-up. Just like Watergate started with reporting, Watergate started with 2 reporters, and a handful of journalists first started asking questions and discovered that something much bigger might be happening behind the scenes with Watergate. And according to the reporting, the issue inside the White House wasn't simply whether documents would be released. The issue had become how the administration was going to handle the political consequences of those documents. That is a very different conversation. Once the discussion moves away from transparency and towards damage control, people naturally start asking whether the responses become more important than the original controversy. That is exactly what happened during Watergate. Exactly. The break-in Watergate faded into the background. The White House response became the story. The secrecy became the story. The internal meetings became the story. The effort to manage the fallout became the story, just like the Epstein files. It's the same situation. Let me play this clip.
Firsthand on Jen's body, and the New York Times report reveals that Trump and senior cabinet officials held meetings in the Situation Room over the administration's response to the Epstein files. There's no question right now that this is the biggest cover-up of our lifetime. And there is no question right now that MAGA supporters, MAGA politicians, anybody who still supports Trump right now supports child sex abuse and pedophilia. There is no other way around it. Nobody gets to say, oh, I like the tax break anymore.
No, I completely agree, because you read this article and what becomes clear straight from the jump. No one in that room, Caroline Levitt with her Bible, Pam Bondi with her cross, nobody gave one flying fuck about the survivors. No one cared how this affected them. No one cared what was done to them. Nobody said, you know, if he's doing this to little girls and their nipples and we have an allegation of rape, maybe we have a problem. No.
Wow. Okay. See, now let's stop for a second and think about what you just heard. According to that reporting, this issue was serious enough that senior officials and members of the Trump's inner circle were discussing the administration's response at the highest levels. Governments hold meetings every day. Presidents meet with advisors every day. That by itself It's not unusual. But when the public hears about internal strategy sessions over a controversy that was supposed to be resolved through transparency, they begin to ask these questions. Why does this require political management? Why do the Epstein files require handling? Why is there so much discussion about this fallout? Why does it seem like the focus has shifted from answering questions to controlling what is being said and done about the Epstein files? Richard Nixon, our 37th president, Republican, did not lose the American people because 5 men got caught breaking into an office building. He lost the American people because every time the country asked a question, the White House gave an answer that led to 3, 4, 5 different other questions. The break-in became hush money. The hush money became secret meetings. The secret meetings became withheld evidence. The withheld evidence became a fight over the tapes. And by the time those tapes finally came out, the cover-up had done more damage than the burglary ever could in the Watergate scandal. This is why I think the comparison matters. The comparison isn't really about Richard Nixon or Donald Trump. The comparison is about a pattern. It's about what happens when governments start believing that controlling information is safer than releasing the information that should be released. Play this clip.
A little tidbit. Trump called Rupert Murdoch, pop this up. Kyle Griffin is reporting bombshell from Haberman and Swan. Trump wanted the Epstein issue buried and snapped at anyone who mentioned it. In the days before the Wall Street Journal published that Epstein birthday book scoop, Trump tried to quash the story by calling Rupert Murdoch News Corp's chief executive and the Journal's editor-in-chief. He failed. And so I wonder if some of this stuff is like
Well, maybe that was all I had of that clip. But, and this is where I part company with the people who say this isn't Watergate and this is not true. These are lies. We can't believe these reporters. I part company with you. I actually think people are asking the wrong question. The question isn't whether the underlying events are identical to Watergate. The question is whether the consequences for the country could be just as great or more fatal or even greater than the Watergate scandal. Think about what Watergate actually was. It was a political burglary. It was an attempt to gather information on the Democratic Party from the Republican Party. It was the Republican Party that broke into that Watergate was about. Watergate was about a Republican president covering up a burglary so he could save his presidency. But look at what this controversy is connected to. This isn't a break-in at an office. This is tied to the most infamous sex trafficking scandal in modern American history. It involves politically connected people who were treated differently from ordinary citizens. It involves repeated promises that the truth would finally come out. It involves an administration that spent years telling the public that transparency mattered and that hidden information should be exposed. Watergate asks one basic question: did the White House abuse its power to protect itself? This controversy asks a broader and even more disturbing question: do powerful people in America operate under a completely different set of rules than anybody else? And when those rules are threatened, will the government step in to protect them? That is a much bigger question than a burglary. And I think that's why this story has touched a lot of people's nerves, this Epstein story. Because if the American people come to believe that there's one system of justice for ordinary people and another one for politically connected people, then the damage goes far beyond one administration. It damages faith in the courts. It damages faith in the law enforcement, fair elections, and the government itself. Richard Nixon lost the public trust because people concluded he wasn't telling them the truth. Donald Trump is losing the public trust because people have concluded that he's not telling the truth. But imagine if millions of Americans conclude that not only that they are not being told the truth, but the truth is being hidden to protect the entire network of powerful and connected people. That is the different level of crisis. That is a different level of deceit. Watergate was ultimately about one president and one White House. This controversy, this Epstein controversy, has the potential to become a story about the credibility of every institution that touched the Epstein case, every administration that handled the files, and every agency that investigated this matter, and every politician who promised transparency but delivered secrecy. That's why I think this could become bigger than Watergate. Not because I know every fact, not because I know exactly what is in the files, but because I understand what destroys public trust. The original scandal starts the fire. The perception that the government is protecting the powerful pours gasoline on it. And if the American people come to believe that the response to the Epstein files was not about protecting an investigation, not about protecting victims, but about protecting institutions and protecting connected people from embarrassment or exposure, like the president, then the political and historical impact could rival Watergate or even surpass it. Because Watergate taught Americans that a president could abuse the power of the government. That's what Watergate taught us. This controversy raises that possibility. The Epstein files raises that same possibility in the minds of many Americans, me included, that the entire system may be protecting itself. And if people lose faith, not just in this president, but in the institutions themselves, then you're talking about something that could leave a scar on this country that lasts for generations. I already believe that this president has broken something within this country. Irreversibly broken. This president has broken something. Okay? We don't know what, but he's broken something. And this is where I think the Watergate comparison stops being a headline and starts becoming a real historical argument. Watergate was not remembered because of the original act of the break-in. It was remembered because the government became part of the effort to keep the public from understanding the original act. I'm not sitting here telling you that every allegation connected to Jeffrey Epstein has been proven. I'm not saying that every rumor is true. What I am saying is that governments rarely lose the trust of the public because of the original story. They lose it when people begin to believe they're not being given the whole story. They get lied to. They get told X, Y, and Z. They get told that the files are going to be released, and then they don't get released. And then they can't be released because my friend might be in trouble. They can't be released because the president is stalling. The president is stonewalling the files. People lose trust because of that. A lot of people lost trust because of that. For years, Americans were told that transparency mattered. They were told that hidden information should be exposed, no matter who is embarrassed. They were told there could not be one set of rules for ordinary people and another set for the politically connected. Those were not unreasonable expectations. Those expectations were encouraged by the very people who now find themselves having to answer the questions. And that is why this story has become bigger than one set of files. It has become a story about whether the government is treating transparency as a principle or a political convenience. It has become a story about whether the public is being informed or they're being managed.
Is that the president has lied about being on Epstein's plane, and the unredacted files prove that. There's a lot in here. I'm shocked. When will you comply with the law and release all of the files?
As I said to you when we spoke before, we have complied with the law. We have
There are 3 million more documents, and you know what you said to me? They're all duplicative, and they include another guy named Epstein.
No, I didn't
Nobody's
say
buying.
that. I did not
say
that.
That's what you said.
So look,
reclaiming my time.
Can I answer? Can I answer the question?
Not. I just gave you the answer you gave me. I told him the answer he gave me, and now in public he's trying to say something else. Please stop the clock. Can I get that time back? May I have 20 seconds back, Mr. Chairman? Thank you. I very much appreciate that. Mr. Blanche.
You don't want me to answer the question?
Mr. Blanche, as you know, I visited DOJ 3 times for as much as 10 hours, and I'll be going back. Does the Epstein File Transparency Act say that the file should be available to members of Congress with a minder at DOJ, where you're in a secure room, you can't write on any of the binders, you can take your own notes? Is that what the Transparency Act says?
It doesn't require we allow you to come to DOJ at all. We did that on our own.
What does it say in terms of transparency? It says that they should be made publicly available.
And they were.
Am I correct?
And
publicly
they were.
available.
And they were.
Oh, well, let's talk about that.
Okay.
Time of the gentlelady has expired.
I beg your pardon. And I'd actually like to get 20 seconds back. How do I get cut off 2 minutes into this?
2 minutes and 10 seconds. Time of the gentlelady has expired.
I beg your pardon, Mr. Chairman. What rules are we operating under? Because he's under a little bit of heat for not prosecuting anyone in these monstrous crimes? I've been in the room. I have been there. This is what I had to do, to transcribe, to show what is true. What is true is that the president has lied about being on Epstein's plane, and the unredacted files prove that. There's a lot in here. I'm shocked at this. There's also this set of files in the file. This is investigation into the potential co-conspirators of Jeffrey Epstein. I almost used up all the blank ink in the hallway because it's all covered up. It's all covered up. The American people are not stupid. They know that when members of Congress have to go in and actually unredact to try to find the truth for these victims, something is corrupt. Something is corrosive. What is true is that the president has...
So, 50 years ago, Americans looked at Richard Nixon, our 37th president, and asked a simple question. If there is nothing on those files, nothing on those tapes that changes the story, why are you fighting so hard to keep us from hearing or seeing the files? Why are you trying so hard that we can't see the files? Today, many Americans are asking a version of that same question. If there's nothing in these files that changes the story, if there's nothing that requires political damage control, then why does every road seem to lead back to secrecy, internal meetings, and efforts to get ahead of the fallout? Maybe history will decide that there was nothing extraordinary to hide. Maybe it will decide that every decision was made for legitimate reasons. But history also tells us that the original event, the Epstein files, is not always what defines an era. Sometimes it's the response, the secrecy, the feeling that the people in charge are working harder to protect themselves than to tell the American people the truth. That was the lesson of Watergate. The burglary of Watergate started the story. The cover-up became the story. And that is why so many Americans are looking at what is happening today with the Epstein files and wondering whether they're watching the same pattern unfold. Let me play this tape.
Now know why Trump really tried so hard to keep the Epstein files hidden. There is a new email from this document dump that really kind of gives us a picture as to why. I just want to remind everyone that in 2016, Jeffrey Epstein told his brother Mark that if everyone knew what he did about the candidates in 2016, Trump and Clinton, that they'd have to cancel the election. And we're starting to see why. This email right here, where Mark Epstein writes Jeffrey Epstein, ask him if Putin has the photos of Trump, Bubba. Apparently, Bubba was their nickname for Bill Clinton. And don't miss the detail on this chain that says Epstein's with Steve Bannon. So if I'm not mistaken, this is saying Trump did the Monica Lewinsky to Clinton, and there are photos of it. It all makes sense now. And this is why Bannon is saying if they don't win in 2028, he and lots of others are going to go to jail. I mean, good God, people. No wonder FBI agents had to take breaks going through all this stuff. We now know why Trump
So now we're waiting for the transparency to come through. Now the public has lost faith in this administration. So the similarities are with Watergate are are glaringly obvious for some. We never did find out everything we wanted to know about Watergate. We probably never will find out everything that we want to know about Epstein. But what we do know is, what I do know is, when you give me 30 routes going in the same direction and they're leading to one road, I can only conclude that the road is what I'm actually looking for, that the road is what it is. It is what it is. Why fight so hard to hold back the files? Why fight so hard? You had no reason to fight so hard for these files. You could have pretended like you had nothing to do with it and then released them and then said, hey, I had nothing to do with the release. You could have did that. But this president has fought so hard for the release, just like Richard Nixon fought so hard for him not to give up those videotapes, to not give up those tapes that were recording everything in the Oval Office. He fought tooth and nail not to have to give up those tapes. Donald Trump has fought tooth and nail not to give up these files. Todd Blanche all off the bat said, I'm not giving up the files. Why would you fight that hard not to give up files if you weren't in them in any way, shape, or form? This is what I keep coming back to. And people have to draw their own conclusions. This situation, these Epstein files, have the potential to be more damaging than Watergate. It just does. And it is what it is. People, you can say that it's not true. It is true. We already have a lot of stuff. We already have a lot of evidence. They have plenty of evidence. There's plenty of videotapes. You just got to find people who are willing to put them out. There's some things that are out. You know, I haven't read through them, but there's some things that are out. These things are in the files. But it is what it is. So my thing is, hey, stick with the content. If you like my commentary, please hit the like, share, and subscribe button. I have content like this every day, Monday through Thursday. Drop TikToks and those kind of things on the weekend. And I will be back with another video. And I appreciate you coming to listen to my comparison and the cover up. And I will see you in the next video. I appreciate you guys. I appreciate you guys.